Well, hello everybody, Max of Pilots and Prop Wash here, and today we're talking about the right plane for the right job. History is replete with examples of the wrong airplane being used to do the job, or the wrong airplane being developed for the job. No better example exists than when, after the First World War, old training planes were used to fly the airmail. Now, of course, it's understandable. Aviation was new. This is what they had on hand. But the airplanes actually weren't that well equipped to do it. And things even got worse during the airmail scandal when military day biplane fighters attempted to fly the mail, mostly at night and often in bad weather, resulting in quite a few casualties. But it was a classic example of the wrong aircraft, and in that case, the wrong pilots being chosen for the job. That's not a knock on the military fighter pilots of the day. They simply were not experienced airmail pilots, and it was a different skill. There are also quite a few examples of the wrong airplane being developed for the job. And one of the shining examples of that was when Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense of the United States, decided that the Air Force and the Navy should share a common fighter plane, kind of like they're doing today with the F-35. They came up with a program, TFX, which led to the F-111. The Air Force was to get the F-111A, the Navy the shorter-nosed F-111B. And it was just an airplane that was not suitable for the fleet interceptor role, which is what it was intended for, and certainly not for dogfighting over Vietnam. Without getting into a lot of detail, which really should be a video of its own, the navalized F-111B simply was not the airplane for the job. When McNamara resigned his position as Secretary of Defense, the F-111B lost its biggest supporter. And not long after that, Vice Admiral Connolly told Senator Stennis in no uncertain terms a famous quote that all the thrust in Christendom could not make a fighter out of that airplane. And that finally pretty much killed the program. The Air Force, of course, proceeded with it as a deep interdiction bomber, the F-111, and later the EF-111 Raven, in which it was very successful. But the point I'm getting at is, in the case of the airmail, they used what was on hand. They used the wrong plane for the job because it was what was available. It's what they knew. But in the case of the F-111B, they were actually developing the wrong airplane for the job, which is a whole other animal. A lot of money was wasted on that program. There are a lot of other examples of this throughout history. I'm sure you all will be putting some in the comment section. I do look forward to reading them. But in general aviation, there are also a lot of other examples, and they're pretty good ones. There are a lot of airplanes that were custom tailored for jobs. For example, the Cessna 150 was intended to be an easy-to-fly trainer. Some people argue perhaps too easy to fly. But it's been extremely successful and still a very popular little airplane because it's tailor-made for what it does. It can take one or, in some cases, two people on a decent little cross-country, or it can be used as an inexpensive sightseeing toy, or it can be used as a trainer. It's probably its primary role. But there are a lot of airplanes that were not great for that role. And the one that comes to mind from my personal experience is the old Grumman Yankee. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with it, the Grumman Yankee and trainer were a Jim Beatty design that Grumman decided to put into mass production. And it's a neat little airplane. I don't want to badmouth it. I had a lot of fun in that little plane. But it's not really a great primary trainer because the airplane's got some wicked little habits if you don't know what you're doing, especially the Yankee before they put the extra stall strips on it and made the trainer out of it. Long story short, it wasn't too long before a couple of guys went out and crashed the thing. One was killed and the other was seriously injured. And the airplane just wasn't forgiving enough for a student. It dropped like a stone. It could go into an accelerated stall very easily. One could argue that maybe the control pressures on it were a little too light, making it easy to over-control. And don't get me wrong, these are not things you can't handle. If you're a little experienced as a pilot and you learn its quirks, you'll be fine. But for primary students, the people who just got their certificate, it was asking a lot. And of course, it's the one everyone wanted to fly because it's a sporty little low-wing sliding canopy airplane, has that fighter plane look. But there have been quite a few mishaps with this airplane. You can get yourself in trouble in a hurry with it. And that's just not a good characteristic for a civilian primary trainer. Another example of people buying the wrong plane for the job, and you guys know where I'm going to go with this, is the fork-tailed doctor killer. You get somebody who's got a fair amount of money and, let's be honest, probably a fair amount of ego. They go get their private ticket at a 150 or 172 or a Cherokee, and then they run off and buy the slickest thing they can afford, and that's a Bonanza. And it just turns out to be too much airplane for them. Now, if they want to go get proper training, it's not such a big deal. The Bonanza is a truly excellent plane, but it will bite you. That excellence comes with the need to pay attention to what you're doing and to know what you're doing. An example of aircraft that are tailor-made for training for the specific needs they have are the Cessna T-37 Tweet and T-38 Talon. The T-37 is an easy-to-fly jet that is a great primary trainer for people, and the T-38 Talon flew by design like a Century Series aircraft to prepare pilots to fly things like the F-100 and the F-104, very unforgiving aircraft. These are two aircraft that were the right aircraft for the right job. I'll start off this little segment by talking about the first airplane that I was instructed to go buy for my new boss. And I need to tell everybody, as you probably already know, this is a stream of consciousness video. I'm not reading a script. So if you hear me kind of repeat things or stutter a little bit, it's just this is the way the thoughts are flowing through my mind. At least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. When I got hired as a commercial pilot for an upstart small corporate flight department, the boss told me what he needed. And he needed something that could carry his family. He wanted to be able to go cross-country yet have something cheap enough to give local sightseeing rides into business associates. He gave me an operating price range, and I started digging through Trade-A-Plane, back when you actually flipped through Trade-A-Plane. I found a 1965 Cherokee 6 with 260 horsepower engine that seemed to meet all our needs. Now, it was not as nice as the 300 horse jobs. It didn't go as fast, didn't haul quite as much, but it did do the job that was necessary, and it was economical. We operated the plane for a year before he decided a corporate flight department was just a little too expensive, and that was that. However, the airplane actually did its job very well. By taking the time to study his wants and needs and what he could afford, we settled on an airplane that was just right for the job, sort of like a liftover drag diagram. Now, there are times that getting the wrong aircraft for the job results in the right aircraft for the job. For example, the F-111B that I talked about did lead to the F-14 Tomcat, so something good came out of it. Going back to civilian aircraft, the Luscombe that my dad taught me to fly in was a great little run-around, cheap-to-operate airplane. It wasn't the greatest primary trainer because it could be twitchy on the ground, but outside, and it also stalled very clean, so you had to be careful of that. But outside of that, the airplane actually was a great little airplane. So for a private pilot looking for something cheap to fly just to go have some fun with on day VFR, who was willing to invest in mastering the airplane, it was a great little choice. But I don't think I'd want to use it as a primary trainer, although I know some flying schools did. I don't know what their accident rate was, but I'm inclined to think it might have been a little bit much. However, it'd make a great tailwheel trainer because it'll definitely make a tailwheel pilot out of you. An example of a neat little traveling airplane that I would not want to use as a trainer might be something like a Globe Swift. They're fast, they're complex, and they're very efficient. But it's my understanding that they're a little bit of a handful to fly and not something you want a primary student in. By the same token, I would not buy something like an Aeronca Champ as a traveling airplane, as much as I love the Champ. It's a great little tootle-around airplane, but I'm not going to take it out at night or IMC or really even on a long trip. Heck, I could probably get there faster in a car. So all I'm driving at is you need to pick the right plane for the right job. When I bought my first airplane, I actually partnered with a Piper Colt. It met my little crossover diagram on purchase cost, cost of operation, speed, and capabilities. I had no intention of flying the thing IMC or at night. Basically, I just use it as a day VFR short travel airplane, trips of a couple of 100 miles, or for tooling around locally, and it worked perfectly. This is probably one of the reasons airplanes like Cessna 172s and Cherokees and Musketeers were as popular as they were. They're really excellent crossover civilian aircraft. They're cheap enough to purchase, cheap enough to operate, safe enough to fly. They can be IFR if you want them to be. They do make decent cross-country travel airplanes while being cheap enough to fly around locally and take your friends for rides. These aircraft really do fill a great middle area. Higher performance aircraft like Moonies and Bonanzas and the retractable gear Cessnas and of course obviously like Twins are really geared more as traveling machines, and although they can be reasonably economical, they're usually a somewhat higher bar to get into. And they do need more training. They're complex aircraft, higher maintenance, and so on and so forth. A lot of people I've known in the past have gotten these things because they wanted to go someplace fast, and when they started getting the bills on maintenance, they decided maybe a 172 was a better option. They could lose the speed for the savings and money. Again, it's all about getting the right plane for the right job. So, what do? Well, if you're looking for an aircraft, what I recommend you figure out is, just like I did with my old boss, what is your purchase price window? How much can you afford to pay an operating cost? How fast do you want to go? How many people do you want to carry? And what kind of conditions do you want to fly under? It may turn out that a secondhand Baron or Bonanza is exactly what you're looking for, or it may turn out that all you need is a little Grumman Tiger. It's a decision that needs to be made by common sense and judgment, not ego. In fact, I dare say that ego has probably driven more pilots into bad situations, both financially or in flying, than just about any other single thing. Judgment matters when you fly, and judgment matters when you buy. Well, guys, those are my off-the-cuff thoughts for today about buying the right plane for the right job. This is Max of Pilots and Prop Wash. Blue skies and tailwinds.